Organizationally, yeah. All right, well, let's start with
the difficult day.
Yeah, difficult day.
Difficult day and then the lesson from that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a difficult day. There was other difficult portions of some missions where like we weren't getting the pertinent information that we needed, or for us in Afghanistan, we relied heavily on American resources. Like we relied heavily on our big brothers, and that was always frustrating. So like we knew what we were capable of, but in some cases we needed assistance just to get there.
Right.
When the Canadians tactical chopper aviation squadron, when they started to come on board, and they had what they're called, the HIPs, MI HIPs. So they had these HIP helicopters, old school helicopters, these Russian helicopters, and our Canadian pilots that flew these choppers, you could tell, man, they wanted to be there, and a lot of them were new to a combat environment. So some were very risk adverse, and some were less so. And it was always really cool because whenever we had a job coming up, we always knew that it was going to rely on lift, right? I shouldn't say not always, depending on the location, right, geographically. Like we had the ability to get there, with vehicles or foot, but for the most of the time, there was a lift component. We needed to get to the job.
Right.
So we relied heavily on the Americans as our big brothers and as our allies, which was great because they were, they had plentiful, right?
Yeah.
Tons of choppers, they got tons of pilots with combat experience, and that's their job and they love doing it. So whether or not they're taxiing us to the job or the Americans, they were cool to do it. When the Canadians really started to get on board with the aviation squadron, the frustrating part was being part of the ground force, we just want to do our job. But oftentimes we would have to rely on whether it was good weather, if we had good weather so the choppers could fly, if there was a particular area that we needed to land the choppers, if it was suitable for the ability of the pilots or of the aircraft. So there was a lot of external factors that were outside of our control. That was frustrating because we would get spooled up for jobs and do rehearsals, and everybody knew what their task and orientation was in relation to the job. And then, on the 11th hour, as it's sometimes referred to, it'd be a no-go. No-go due to weather, the winds were picking up, or, there's a sandstorm or whatever. There was always, I shouldn't say always, there was oftentimes something, and that would happen over and over. So we would call it a Rolex, Rolex 24 hours, which means we'll try again tomorrow.
Right.
We'll try again tomorrow. But the reality is these shitheads that we're after, some of them bunker down, but some of them move.
Right.
So the intelligence that we would get, it's...
has an expiry date.
Yeah, that says like expiry date. That's right. It's finite when you get it, but that information is only applicable if it's timely and if it's actionable. And certainly not casting shade on pilots or the intelligence folks, because everyone's trying to do their job.
Mm-hmm.
But the frictions that people don't hear about and that don't know about is like, we would often be ready, get ready, stand out. Be ready, get ready, stand out. And that would get frustrating. And sometimes you'd go days and days without doing a job. So you're deployed, you're overseas, we were very fortunate where we have access to gym, you can train and stay fit. You have access to shooting ranges, CQB, you can keep your skills sharp, but you're still not doing the job. Right? So with this question, I guess we can get right into it. Explain the most difficult day and what happened. So I just shared a little bit of the frictions of a daily frustration. Mm-hmm. Now, is that hard? No. Is it, are guys having their brains blown out? And, are you seeing, blood and chaos? No. But it's accumulative, and it becomes a chronic frustration. And sometimes that's not the story that makes a good publicity. That's not the story that makes a good movie, right? For an example. Right. The story that I'll share with you one of the most difficult days in my military career was in the early days of Afghanistan. We were one of the first Canadian conventional force guys to hit foot into Afghanistan. And at that time, I was part of the 2nd Battalion, PPCLI, and our company, Charlie Company, was part of the task force or the battle group that was spooled up from Edmonton. So the 3rd Battalion in Edmonton, they took 2 companies, and then there was an augment of Charlie Company from our battalion. So it was a joint collaboration, which was awesome. And then in that early days, so in 2002, there was a friendly fire incident where American fighter pilot mistook, made a mistake, and dropped the bomb on some Canadians who were training in an area that was called Tarnock Farms, which was close. At that time, it was, I think, maybe, and my memory serves me correctly, it was about a 3 to 5 kilometer max, 3 to 5 kilometer walk from basically where we were bunkered down in the Kandahar airfield to where we would go train. And that particular night, it was Alpha Company that was set to go. Now, a pretext to this story is chance and opportunity. You just never know, what's going to happen or when it's going to happen. So I remember leading up to that particular training night, we as Charlie Company, we were supposed to go out. One of the nights, there was only a certain amount of time we had access to the training range because there was Americans there was Canadians there, everybody wanted to use their range so they could train. And so that had to be coordinated. And I remember that particular night, Charlie Company was slated to go, so our company, and for whatever happened with the scheduling, it switched. No big deal. So Alpha Company went out that night, and to us, we're like, all right, well, we'll end up going out the next night or whatever. We're gonna do some training eventually, so it was no big deal. But that particular night, there was, Alpha Company were firing, small arms, they were firing machine guns, they were firing all sorts of different ammunitions and different weapon systems that would be utilized in a theater of war. So they're honing their skills. And a fighter pilot from the States mistook that as being fired at. So he dropped the bomb. And when he dropped the bomb, there was 4 Canadians that were killed in a friendly fire incident, and then there was multiple Canadians who were severely injured. And that night it was a tough night for the few days afterwards, excuse me, because up until that particular deployment, Canada was very much in a peacekeeping time, right? So a lot of peacekeeping operations, a lot of NEO type operations, so non-combatant evacuation operations. But this was the first time since Korea that Afghanistan brought Canadians to war and actually fight. So there was a lot of firsts, a lot of lessons learned where, we had team leaders, we had senior military leaders in the Canadian forces who never had any exposure. So they were learning, they were trying to adapt to current situations that were changing. Well, when this incident happened, it was a first for a lot of people. So, you can imagine, we get news the next day, there's been a friendly fire incident and, 4 Canadians perished. And then as the story unfolds, we later find out who was involved. And of course, it's a pretty tight military. It's a small country, really. There's multiple degrees of connection. And 2 of the individuals who perished that night were good friends of mine. They were close friends of mine. I did basic training with them. We did infantry school together. And then after infantry school, these 2 guys went to Edmonton and I went to Winnipeg. But we stayed in contact. And then when we had a chance to deploy together, it was great. We'd get a chance to see each other, poking fun at each other, having fun, and it was just really good. So the 4 guys that perished on that night, there was Mark Leger, there was Ainsworth Dyer, Ricky Green, and Nathan Smith. And Ricky Green and Nathan Smith, we knew each other quite well. So when my sergeant major brought us all together to pass on the news, because even though we're about a 5 kilometer distance away, that night when Charlie Company was literally sleeping, we slept through it. We didn't know. So unless you were up for some reason, you may not have even be woken up. So the next morning when our sergeant major brought us up, he kind of pulled us aside and said, hey, there was an incident last night. This is what happened. And as he's sharing the information, I remember just saying, just tell me, because there was a few guys who I was really close with. And I said, just tell me it wasn't so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. And he's like, hey, man, I'm sorry, but yeah. So, yeah, I don't talk about it very often, man. This is crazy. like these guys were awesome dudes, and I didn't know Ainsworth Dyer, and I did know Mark Leger, and of course the guys that do know them, they all have good things to say about them, right? And it always seems to be the way. It's not very often that somebody perishes like, fuck, he's a piece of shit anyway. You know what I mean? It tends to be good people with good intentions. Anyway, so where I'm going with this story is it was a tough day, it was a tough time, because we didn't know how to deal with it, to be honest. And where I'm going to take this to on a positive note is, in that week, there was 4 Canadians who were killed in a friendly fire incident. And then in that same week, we had a planned joint mission to do with American counterparts. So we're going to do a job with Force Recon, U.S. Marine Corps. And they were in an incident a couple of nights prior to when we were supposed to launch. And they lost, I think, 8 guys in their platoon in a pretty heated firefight with the Taliban. So this is all happening pretty quickly. There's a lot going on. The chaos and the reality of war was really become clear, and it was being brought to the surface. So we were trying to learn, adapt, and understand what's going on, what are the realities, and what can we do about it. And what was really cool about this series of events that were, although heavy and hard to deal with, I do remember a particular ground force commander, one of the leaders from the U.S. Marine Corps. He had came down and kind of brought us together, and he gave us basically a speech, kind of a pep talk. And the guys that were getting ready for this job, so keep in mind, this is conventional force guys, 2002, early days of Afghanistan. We had already heard of some of the really good stuff that the special forces were doing, and that motivated us. And you know, we would hear these stories, man, we heard that JTF2 guys did this, and they did an operation with the SEALs, and you know, the Delta guys are smacking. We kept hearing these stories, and we're like, fucking right, these guys are getting after it. This is awesome. So it was motivating. And then as we're doing and planning jobs together with our American counterparts, it was exciting too, because that was new. You know, getting an opportunity to work with, you know, Americans, other folks, and there was some really good takeaways from that. But where I'm going with the story in terms of why it was such a hard time is because literally good Canadians, good Americans were dying. And there's no way to sugarcoat that, and there's not enough books and not enough movies that will really replicate the reality of what that looks like and what that feels like, and the emotions that are directly connected to that. And I tell you, this American that came down to chat with us, we, at that point, we all thought, man, we're probably not doing this job. This is, you know, this mission is probably scrapped, you know, because the Canadians took a very different approach. They're like, hey guys, you know, like, this is a tough time, you know, we're gonna work through this together, and, you know, if you need anybody to talk to, we'll do what we can, and we'll you know, exhaust all resources. And we're like, okay, you know, sure, I'm sure that would be helpful. And I'm telling you, like, I don't know if these Americans do, like, if they do lessons on motivational speeches. I don't know if they probably do. They do lessons on public speaking, because when this guy came down and addressed us, so everybody is, you can imagine, like, morale is low, and guys are like, you know, just trying to keep each other up. And this individual said, hey guys, you just lost 4, we just lost 8. We could sit on our rucksacks and do nothing, but we're not doing anything in the memory of those who are no longer with us. You know, the good guys that are now no longer with us because of these fucking evil pieces of shit. And I'm not even giving it the same respect or articulation that he did. He was extremely professional and very to the point and very aggressive. And he said, we're still doing this. We're doing this job, and we're taking it to them, and they're gonna pay for it. I tell you that the way he delivered it and the way he messaged why we're there and what we're doing, he really highlighted our why. He really highlighted, like, remember why you're here. Remember why you joined the military. Remember, you know, the purpose of why we're here right now. And I bought in 100%. I tell you, like, if somebody's like, yeah, you could go do that job, but you have to be an American. That day, I would have ripped my Canadian flag off and I would have put American on. Honest to goodness, like, I was motivated and fired up to do exactly what this gentleman said we needed to do, and I believed him. And that's what we did. We ended up, you know, fast forwarding. There was a delay, but we ended up doing a joint operation, and I think there was some Marines on it. There was a group from 101st Airborne. 87 Mountain Brigade. Like there was a lot of people involved. It was a huge joint mission that ended up getting off the ground, and you know there was some really positive takeaways. And I think from like a mental fortitude or resiliency development perspective, what that did, I was a young man at the time, what that did for me was it really highlighted like, you know, there was a series of unfortunate circumstances that had happened, but they had happened. And, you know, not to certainly oversimplify it or to suggest in any realm that it was forgotten about, because it's not. It never will be, and it wasn't at the time. But what it highlighted for me was, it happened. What are we going to do about it? What can we do about it, given the people that we have, you know, the resources that we have, the ability that we have? What can we do about it? And that's what I felt like it really honed a few skills that I still use today. It's like, okay, shitty things are going to happen in life. That's inevitable. But how we deal with it is more important than the fact that it happened. Like, you know, I would never want to see anything like that happen to anybody. Of course, none of us do. You know, you would never want to see anything happen to people that you care about. Of course not. But when it happens, what do we do about it? How do we manifest that energy and then turn it into something positive? That's what I took away from that experience at a very young age. It was a hard day in the military. It was a hard phase to fight through, but, you know, am I grateful for it, for that experience? 100%, because had I never gone through that experience, I wouldn't be able to talk about it today, and B, I wouldn't have a reference point. I wouldn't have a reference point of a difficult, shitty situation. So yeah, you know, there are a lot of people who I've had the pleasure to work with that have different stories that, you know, they may be comfortable sharing with, or they may not. You know, they may take it to the grave with them. I do believe that when we experience something tough, it is important to talk about it, but in the right audience, with the right listener, because some people just, they won't listen, or they will be too quick to respond. So you got to be selective with who you share these stories with, but also, like, I know that I'm sharing the story right now, and this will go public, and there are people who will listen to this, and you know, it will resonate with them. It'll probably bring up some old memories that they never wanted to bring up to the surface, and that's not my intent. And there's other guys that'll be like, oh, your details and your facts are skewed. Listen, man, I was there, I lived through it, I know exactly what I'm talking about. Are the timelines off a little bit? Sure, maybe. You know, are the numbers off a little bit? Sure, maybe. And I do respect that details are important. Man, between that time and now, I've gone through a lot of stuff. And I have experienced a lot of stuff in the military and in fighting. Some of it, a lot of it, is not all good, you know? So yeah, sometimes what happens and what goes on in my brain, like I sometimes will skew details. Like, I'm a human being just like everybody else. But what I know is the emotions that one goes through are real. So, like, you know, and I'll just share one more story with regard to emotions and resiliency and just being mentally tough. You know, I was very fortunate, all of the operations that I did in Afghanistan. So that one I just shared with you is when I was with the conventional force, and then fast forward, spent some time, a lot of time overseas with the special forces. And I was very lucky where the teams that I was with, the ground force I was with at the time, accumulated up to, I think, just under 70 direct action missions. So that's a lot. And the reality is, you know, sure, there's other guys out there who have done more, you know, chance and opportunity, have got some real trigger time. That was not my experience. I did almost 70 operations, and I fired my service rifle 3 rounds. 3 rounds in a general location. So 70 operations, one of the operations we're being shot at, a return fire, 3 rounds in a general location where we're being fired at. That's the only time I fired my service rifle. That was my experience. There are other guys who I've worked with who have some serious trigger time and who have seen some serious combat. And here's the thing. Of those 70 DAs, one thing that is 100% the same is the emotions that are connected to each and every one of those missions are real. And you can't do those over and you can't take them back. So every time I step foot onto a chopper, every time we kicked the door in and entered a compound not knowing what was on the other side, those emotions are real. So although, yeah, I never took somebody's life, you know, I'm not suggesting for a second that, you know, that means anything in terms of like trophy or accolades, not at all. Because the reality is those who have taken the life of another man, another person, that's on them and they have to own that for the rest of their lives. There's no do-overs. So when I talk about doing direct action missions, every time we suited up for a mission, it was as real as it gets. We didn't know what the circumstances were always changing. Of course, we had a lot of planning and we had a lot of resources to help us to be as successful as possible in those operations, but there's always the unknown variable. Is the intelligence accurate? Is there more people than we anticipate? Are they heavily armed? Is the place, you know, rigged with homemade explosive devices? You know what I mean? All of these factors are real. So every time that we would, you know, step on the chopper, every time that we enter a new compound, not knowing what was on the other side, that's accumulative over time. The reason I share that is because every time you do something, no matter what it is, you know, you change your tire on your car for the first time. The first time it's a bit cumbersome. You're kind of awkward trying to figure it out. Every time thereafter, you put a fresh tire in the car, you get a little bit smoother at it, you get a little bit better at it. It becomes a little bit more natural, a little bit more comfortable. Well, it's no different with these types of operations. It's no different with this type of line of work. So, yeah, do I have a lot of experience? 100%. Are there other guys out there who've done a lot more than me and have more experience? 100%. The reality, though, is everybody is dealing with their internal struggles differently. And that war within is different for everybody. And, you know, so I guess in a long-winded wraparound, that particular operation, that particular moment that I shared with you was a difficult time, but it was also the foundation that I needed as a professional soldier and as a man. It was the foundation that I needed to then become even more resilient as the years went on and become even more mentally strong as the years went on.
You were pointing out earlier during your first story about how your reference point kind of changes and who you talk to. They're going to interpret your story differently based on their own reference points, but there's a few ways to look at that particular story and your reference from the outside looking in. For me, for example, it's like, that's crazy. You lost like some really good guys that night, and it could have been your turn to be on that range, you know, like you were scheduled originally to be on that range. So your reference there is that could have been you, right? And most people will never in their whole life have a reference point of that could have been my day,
Yeah.
right? So when you're approaching many things in your day-to-day life, most things won't even faze you, I'm sure, because it is nothing in comparison to the things that you've encountered in your time serving or just in your life in general. And for somebody like me from the outside looking in, it's like pretty intense to think, if that had been you, how different so many people's lives would be today that you have had an impact on since that day, for example. Like I never would have known you, right? Or like any of your clients, or there's so many things that just infinitely stem off from just one person. So even a lesson that's totally unrelated to like your military service there, but comes from it, is you have no idea when you're going to be able to have a positive impact on someone, a negative impact on someone, any kind of impact.
Yes. You
have no idea when you're no longer going to be able to, you know, interact with certain people. So like every single interaction matters, which is another reference point that I think is super important to consider, because I know my life would be completely different if I didn't know you, right? And there's so many people that would say that. So appreciating all that time and the people is so important.
I agree with you, and I appreciate that too. You just never know. And every day we walk through life and you just don't know whose life, by one phrase, one comment, one word, you just don't know who you're going to turn around and send them on a trajectory of something positive. You just never know. And it may sound corny, but I don't care. People can cast shade and make judgments, and no problem. I'll still rip your face off. But the reality is, like, I loved my time in the military. I loved being in uniform. I was that guy that, you know, really bought into be all that you can be at the beginning. I loved my time in the military. But I can tell you right now, and you look you square in the eye, and I know I am living my purpose right now. What I was meant to do, I'm doing now. And it's every day rewarding, because I get such a great opportunity to work with military guys, law enforcement guys, general public. And the reality is, every group of people I have an opportunity to work with, they have real struggles. They have a ton to offer. They just need to in some cases, just hear it from an outside voice, hear it from a different perspective. And I know that every time I get an opportunity to work with somebody, whether it's one-on-one or in a small group setting, I have a positive impact. And I know this is what I was meant to do.
That's huge. I think that so many people go through life never knowing what their purpose is, if they even have one, maybe not even having the desire to have one. And to know that you're doing exactly what you were meant to do is like a privilege and like a huge like source of, I'm sure, like happiness for you, and it like gives your life that sense of direction and whatnot. And even for me, just listening to your stories today, it puts things into serious perspective. Like, if there's something that I'm thinking of right now, it's like, wow, that's terrifying. Like, I can't even imagine making this decision or doing this. Like, it's terrifying to me from my current perspective. If you can go through what you just said you went through and be here today saying what you're saying, there's so many things that I don't need to be terrified about, or that I don't need to be afraid to engage in, because I have the opportunity and privilege of being able to do those things. And even though they're terrifying, they're in reference to your life are not terrifying at all.
Yes.
You know, so I think that for people who don't have the experiences of the magnitude that you do, it's very important to hear them. And as long as the person can just listen and understand and appreciate that experience, even if they can't understand it, if they can take that and apply it to their life as a principle, that you are always capable of more than you think you are. And experiences and opportunities are that, experiences and opportunities, and to try and take advantage of those things, because you don't know when more of those opportunities or experiences will become available, then things become a lot less scary. Like, it puts things in perspective, you know? I think that that's very, very important for people. I know that that's important for me, and even just sitting here in the last half an hour, like, things are clicking that weren't clicking 2 hours ago when I woke up this morning, and when something was on my mind that I was like, I don't know if I can do that. Now it's like, I can fucking do that. Like, if Randy can do this, why can't I do that, you know? Like, it's very motivating. I don't love the word motivating, but it is very motivating, you know?
Yeah, like, you know, when we were talking about earlier about chance and opportunity, just, you never know what's around the corner. So sometimes people will ask me, like, how do you stay motivated? I'm motivated by not knowing what's around the corner. So I'm like that little kid that, you know, is your mom says, your dad says, you know, don't go over there. Like, well, what's over there? Right? Like, I'm that kid. I'm like, well, the curious mindset. I'm like, well, I want to find out what's over there. That's what keeps me motivated. It's like, what's next? What am I going to learn tomorrow that I didn't know yesterday, right? Those are some of the things that keep me motivated. And another, you know, quick story that I'll share with you in terms of chance and opportunity. You know, like, it's another overseas story and context. So, you know, we have groups of guys that are very, very capable, very talented, smart, motivated, you know, self-starters. And when situations happen, like, for an example, I remember doing a job one time where our team was split. So we had half a team, you know, smacking one compound, and another team smacking another one, which was about 400 meters apart. And chance and opportunity. The team that I was with, we went into this one particular compound, dry hole, nothing's going on. The other team, not so much, you know, very heated chaos. And, you know, and we're listening to it, waiting for, do you need support? We're listening to what's going on. Do you need anything? We're ready to, you know, sprint that 400 meters and close the distance. You know, in quick time, things were taken care of. But there's a situation that easily could have been the opposite. It just happened that our team went to this compound, nothing happened. The other team, not so much, right? And like, any given time or opportunity, that could easily be switched. Well, very similar to life. Like, when things happen, it's like, oh, that's so unfortunate. Why did that happen to such a good person? We don't know. And if we try to connect the dots, we'll probably drive ourselves crazy. But it's an opportunity. Because this happened, what can we learn from it, right? So, for an example, just past weekend, a coworker of my wife, he perished in a car accident, and drinking and driving. Like, there are people who have the occasional drink and have probably driven when they probably shouldn't have. I'm guilty of it. And when things like this happen, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn from somebody else's misfortune, and it sucks. And from what I know of the individual, he's a huge personality. People loved when he was around. And he's got 2 small kids and a wife. And that was the decision that he made, and it's unfortunate he's no longer with us. We could sit and dwell, we could mope, we could weep. What does that do? What does that do for anything or anybody? Is that important? Yeah, in some cases, yeah, it's important to, let out a cry, talk to somebody. It is important, but we need to move on from that. I use that as motivation on what not to do, or how to live better, how to make a wiser decision. It's unfortunate that somebody else, and especially it hits home because I knew the guy, and he works closely with my wife, so obviously she's torn up about it. So there's an effect, there's some residue that I absorb, but that's on me. How do I deal with that? Right? Do I say, oh, fuck, I don't know the guy, it doesn't matter to me? That's fucking bullshit. That's a human being. Right. And that's a guy that was doing good things for our society. That matters. Yeah.
There's a ripple effect.
There's a ripple effect. That's a great way to put it.
Both a positive and a negative ripple effect.
That's right.
Yeah.
So focus on the positive. Like, what is the positive? Yes, this is unfortunate, but what is the positive? Well, it's a reminder, right? It's a reminder. It's a humble reminder. Like, hey, you're gonna go with the boys, no problem, man. Have a couple of drinks if that's your thing. But man, if you're behind the wheel, you gotta make wiser decisions, right? Because that's not just affecting you. That is the ripple effect to people that you care about, people that love you, people that are now gonna live life without you. And I'm just using the alcohol, drinking and driving scenario, but that can be so many other things. It can be so many other things. So when you think your life is hard, and you think like you've been given a dose of bad luck, like, pull your head out of your ass, take a deep breath, be grateful for what you do have. Instead of always wondering, looking around the corner, oh man, that guy's got a nice car. Who gives a shit? It's stuff. Oh man, that guy's got a nice kit. Look at his carrier, look at his gun. It's just stuff. It's just stuff to do a job, or it's just stuff to kind of consume. Like, it's not important. It's not important.
There's so many examples of what you were just saying, that it's not important. Like, the day that you are leaving this planet, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter what equipment you have, it doesn't matter what belongings you have. None of that stuff matters because you can't take it with you. So putting the emphasis in your life on the things that actually matter is so important, and I think that people do understand that, but they are bad at actually doing it. The experiences, the people, the things that you truly care about, the people you truly care about are things that really matter, and that's where you should be putting your energy, because anything can happen at any time. The fact that most of us are still here today is pretty miraculous. Like, when you consider all of the things that could happen, and just any series of events, like, I'm sure every person, from a super minor example to a super major example, can understand that every single little decision, any one little change in one of those decisions can completely change the path of whatever outcome we're talking about. Like, somebody who, gets injured, I took such good care of myself, but then this one night I didn't quite sleep right, and then I made one bad decision, now I'm injured. Or a car accident. It doesn't have to be like any crazy car accident. Like, I went through this light, but I hit this red light, and then the next one happened to be green. Oh, if that had been red, I never would have gotten that accident, right? Like, every single little thing can contribute. So making sure that you're understanding and appreciating in your day-to-day life that there's things you have control of and things that you don't will make it easier, I think, for you to appreciate the things that you do have and what you can control. And that's usually the people you care about. and the things that you care about, whether it's your career or, you know, like certain things that you have to do or your training or whatever it might be, like never taking those things for granted is so important.
It is, and I think, you know, if we as a society were to just exercise a little bit of gratitude a little bit more often, and like literally be genuine and say thank you to somebody for doing whatever it is they're doing, especially if they're doing a good job. Actually, I'll share a positive story with you quickly, just bounced in my head. So I was out running some errands the other day, and I picked up some dog food. So and we feed our dog this raw food, comes in frozen bins, looks like ice cream. Anyway. So these things are like, I don't know, 40 pounds or whatever. So I have 2 of them, and I put them on the ground so the cashier can run it. So she hits the little wand, beep, beep, or whatever, and then I start to pay. The little things that matter. For an example, so the 2 things are on the ground. I'm a physically capable dude. She didn't have to do this, but here's the thing, and I gave her props for it. It seems so small, but she picked up the dog food and put it on this little shelf resting area, so it wasn't on the ground. It was a little bit higher, so when I did decide to take it, it was easier for me to pick it up. And I said to her, I said, I like what you did there. I said, you went above and beyond. I said, you didn't have to do that. And I said, but you chose to do that. And she said, oh, well, thank you for even acknowledging it. And she said, I pride myself on customer service and pleasing the customer. And I said, we need more people like you.
Yes.
I said, you are exactly what we need. So I told her, I said, thank you very much. You know, I hope you have an awesome day. And just know that these little things matter.
They do, yeah.
So when you think they don't matter, they do. And when you tell somebody that you appreciate them, it matters. When you thank somebody for especially doing hard work or doing a good job, man, that matters. Yeah. It does matter.
Big time. There's so many examples of those things in your day-to-day life that unappreciative people, to put it kindly, would never notice.
Yeah.
They'd be like, well, why didn't you carry it to my car for me? You know, like there's that whole spectrum there, right?
True,
and if more people were on the side of the spectrum that you just described, you were on that day, where you're like, wow, that's huge that you made that effort for me. Thank you so much. I think that most people understand that it feels good to do good things.
Yeah.
Like you're bumper to bumper traffic or something, and somebody needs in and you let them in and they wave at you, versus don't wave at you. Usually when they wave at you, you're like, oh, you're welcome, sir. You know, and just a little dash of happiness, you know. And if they didn't wave, you might be like, wow, he didn't wave. You know, like there's so many examples of that. But people usually know what it feels like to do something good or to be appreciated or thanked or to give a thanks. There's not enough of that in our society right now.
And I think, so I know you and I spoke about it before, and I think we may have even shared this before, and I talk about it a lot because I believe in it and I think it's really powerful. Like, there's in sports psychology and human behavior, there's a lot of science that supports what the cognitive triangle is. And the cognitive triangle, in most literature that you'll find and that you'll read about it, it talks about thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and how they're all interchangeable. So how we feel, you know, will directly affect how we think about certain things. How we're thinking will have a direct correlation on how we're behaving, and that can be reciprocal and it can be interchangeable. So thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And through the last few years of reading more and studying more and trying to figure out why type 2 diabetes is at an all-time high in Canada and what is going on, I firmly believe that a part of the cognitive triangle that gets missed, and I believe the middle should be the behavior part, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to behave in a certain manner, you know, be a positive light on our society, be an asset to our society, and not a sponge that's always take, and become a liability. So what I truly believe, and this is what I share with people, is we have thoughts, we have feelings, but nutrition is overlooked a lot of times. So our nutrition, what we consume on a day-to-day habitual habit, it has a direct correlation on what we're thinking, how we function as a human being. Therefore, our behaviors become more positive, both internally and externally. And I firmly believe that. Until somebody out there that's got multiple degrees can prove me differently, I firmly believe our thoughts, our feelings, and our nutrition has a direct correlation on the way we behave and the way we look at things. So for an example, that great example that you just gave, you're driving down the highway or whatever, if we just smashed our face full of donuts, ding-dongs, ho-hos, bullshit, because that's junk, we're gonna be thinking like junk. So somebody cuts us off, right away we hammer the horn, you asshole, because you're thinking like junk. But if we just had something wholesome, some fruits, some vegetables, whatever, some good stuff, that person cuts you off because maybe they're having a bad day. We have the ability to then take a breath and be like, that sucks, they just cut us off. They didn't even look. But what's going on? Maybe they just got in a scrap with their significant other before they left the house. Maybe they're stressed out because their kid is in the hospital and they're a little bit distracted. People can always say, it's so easy to highlight the negative so quick. But if we would just take a breath and be like, what's the real situation? We don't know. We don't know what's going on in that person's mind. So I do believe to put things in our favor, if we take care of ourselves, if we stay active, we're going to think differently, we're going to behave differently, and we're going to feel differently, and all in a positive outlet. And it's such a simple thing. It is a simple thing. It's something that we can control. But it's a behavioral thing that takes discipline, and it takes action steps, and it takes a plan.
Something that I'll do often when I'm driving on the highway to keep myself in a state where I can be conscious of other people as much as possible is I will just look around at all the other vehicles on the road, and I'll just kind of graze over all the different faces that I see in cars and try to think, that person, what might they be going through today? Where are they going? Where's that person going? Are they going to work? Are they going to pick up their kids? Are they going to the hospital? Where are they headed? And what things are happening in their life that are totally different than my life? And that's just one car. There's 1,000 cars around me. What about that person? Where are they headed? Oh, they look like they're going to the office.
What's
they're
their
headed
story?
to work. Where did they just come from? What are they dealing with at home? What is their home? And it's our society is such an intricate, crazy, you can't even comprehend how intense the web is of everybody's existence. But if you just stop to make a point of looking out and thinking about how everybody has their own life, and there's so many things in that life, it really puts things in perspective with your life too, right? And you have no idea what people are dealing with. No idea.
Nope.
Somebody you could have a great friend, you've known them forever, and then one day they say something, you're like, I had no idea that happened to you. I think, I never would have thought that would have happened to you. You handle yourself so well that I never would have thought you had that trauma or whatever it is. You have no idea what anybody's dealing with, even your best friends, let alone a stranger on the street. So being sensitive to people and empathetic, I think, would serve us all very well, because it also makes us really appreciate our lives too when you think about what other people might be going through.
I agree. And it's funny, I just had I was doing a consultation yesterday with a couple of clients, and they're asking for some help and guidance with their physical conditioning regime and their nutrition. And one of the clients said, you look like you always got your shit together, you eat really well, you train all the time. I'm like, hey, I'm human just like everybody else, man. I have bad days and I have good days. And they're like, well, how do you, when you have a bad day, how do you right the wrong? And I said, that's a great question. And so I shared this with them, and I'll share with the viewers. I will sometimes choose poor food. I will sometimes indulge on, wings and beer.
You're human.
Yeah, I'm human, and I enjoy that stuff. But I look at it like there's a payoff, right? There's a payoff. So I don't take without giving something back. So for an example, if I was out drinking pints last night and crushing wings, guess what? Today I crank up the furnace because I need to pay that back. And there's a dividend, if you will, or an exchange that has to happen. And I keep myself accountable. So if I have maybe 2 days in a row of poor food choices, I need to cut that habit right now before that becomes a consistent. Now, I just use 2 days for me because that's what helps keep me alive. You may be different, but you have to have something in place that keeps us in check, right? So live life, indulge every now and again, but don't make excuses for yourself why tomorrow is going to be the new day. I'll just wait until tomorrow. I'll just wait until Friday. I'll just wait until Monday. Stop it. Stop it. Be honest with yourself. What you're doing today has an effect on how you perform tomorrow. So in life, if we lashed out at somebody that didn't deserve it, you cannot get that back. But what you can do is be more cognizant tomorrow. So if an interaction of similar status was to come to fruition, now you have a reference point of what not to do, so you can apply a little bit more of a positive approach for the next go around. And that takes discipline and it takes awareness. You know, it does take awareness. Some people are, you know, just not good people. Like some people are just fucking, they live through life just to be an asshole and cast shade wherever there's shade to be casted. You know, make comments. Like, forget about those people. They will always exist. Forget about those people. I call those folks the snakes in the grass. Yeah. They're always going to be snakes in the grass. Forget them. Focus on the people that share similar types of mindsets and surround yourself with positive, and that tends to grow. Right? And then you'll attract people that are very similar. Yeah. But we have to be aware of that. We have to control that. So in other words, you know, as a simple fix, if you're around people that will justify on your behalf why it's okay to eat a bag of donuts, that's probably not somebody you want to hang out with. Right? So like, cut that shit off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just had a client a couple of days ago say something similar to me, like, you know, lately I've been really struggling to enjoy anything when it comes to working out or taking care of myself. Like, I'm just like in this slump and I don't know how to get out of it. And then she's like, but you don't know what that's like. Like, just assumes right away that, like, I've never had that. I'm like, oh, trust me, there's days where I gotta drag myself into the gym too. Like, there's 100% those days. Like, we're all in the same boat when it comes to that. There's days where I don't want to eat well. Yeah. And I'm like, give me a couple of pizzas. Yeah. Let's go. Yeah. You know, like, screw it. Yeah. It happens to everyone. Like, so instead of saying, like, okay, well, you know, just get back on the train and just offering some like vague advice, it's like, okay, well, if you're not enjoying what you're currently doing, what do you enjoy? Right? So, do you enjoy going for bike rides? That counts. Like, start with stuff you like. Yes. If you like going for a 10-minute run, go for a 10-minute run. That counts. Like, something is better than nothing. And if you start with the things you hate, you're probably not going to stick to it and have success. So start with things you like, and then build back up to the things that you dislike a little bit. You know, have a little bit of both. That's great. But there's all in your rule that you were mentioning about 2 days. I heard about that recently from somebody else too. They call it the 2-day rule. It's like, you don't miss your habit for more than 2 days, and that way you're successful 5 out of the 7 days a week, guaranteed. Yeah. And usually, if you can stick to something for 2 days, if you miss one, you get back on for 2, miss 1, whatever. As soon as you get to like missing 3, 4, 5 days, that's when you really start to fail. So if you can limit you missing something to 2 days, you're going to be successful 5 out of the 7, and that's a really good rule. I think people would benefit from. But just making sure that you're holding yourself accountable to that, you know, whatever that might be, 1 or 2 days, would really serve people well. So sometimes people will ask me, and I would like to ask you what your feedback would be. I'll give mine and give you an opportunity to think about your response. But some people say, but how do I hold myself accountable, right? I'm like, that's easier than you think. How do you hold yourself accountable? Earlier we talked about type 2 diabetes in Canada being at an all-time high. If we don't take charge right now, if you don't take charge of your life right now, you're going to be part of that statistic. And then to compile that, or to compound the heat and the weight of it, ask the individual, is there somebody that you know right now who would be devastated if you were no longer on this earth? Is the answer yes? Of course it is. There's always somebody that absolutely loves you. You're the most favorite person. You're somebody's most favorite person in the entire world. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be here much longer. It's as serious as that. And I talk about sugar, like, I call it the silent killer. And I treat it like as evil as drugs. And people are like, oh man, you're over the top with sugar. I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Because sugar is the number one cause. For sure. Is the number one. Oh my goodness. It is the cause of so many issues. So people are like, well, how do I keep myself accountable? Think about the people that you have in contact with every single day. Not just your family, but your external circle. If you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be enjoyable to be around. People will stop calling you. They don't want to be around you because you're miserable. And the reason that you're miserable is because you're not taking care of yourself. If that's not accountability enough, I don't know what is. I don't know what is. And people are like, well, it's not that easy. Bullshit, man. Bullshit. We have a plethora of outdoors to it's at our fingertips. All you got to do is get out and move. Yes. Whether you go for a walk, you take the dog for a walk, it does not matter, man. Go pick a flower, go look at a piece of whatever. Nature's beautiful. Dude, those are excuses. Yeah. Get out of your own way. And I get fired up because sometimes people say, what are your, when people come train with you, what are your expectations? And I'll say, well, my expectations are when you come in, you're prepared to work. That's it. Everything else, leave it up to me. But you better when you come in here, you better be prepared to work. I'm not doing it for you.
I'm going to show you, I'm going to guide you, I'm going to mentor you. You got to do the work. So my only real expectation is, I guess I have more than one, but the main one is be willing to put in the work. Be respectful, of course, and be kind to others, but be willing to do the work. Because if you're not, I don't have a lot of time for you. I have so little patience for laziness. Like I lose patience very quickly. And I got a tattoo on my arm as a reminder, like, have patience. Everybody is out there is not the same as me, and I need to accept that. I do not accept laziness.
Yeah.
If you're fucking lazy, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem. So don't put your shit on me. And man, that shit fires me up. But I'm gonna bring it back to you.
Yeah.
Well, what advice would you give somebody if they're saying, well, how do I keep myself accountable? What can I do to, ensure that I'm on track, whether nutrition, physical activity, etc.
For me, it always comes down to what don't I want to be? What do I not want for myself? And if I don't want it, then I'm not gonna let it happen. Like if I don't want to be overweight, then I'm not gonna be overweight. If I don't want to be viewed as lazy, I'm not gonna be lazy.
That's a great way to look at it.
So I kind of look at it from a reverse perspective, just because that works for me. With a lot of things, I'm sure there's other things where I'm like, this is something I want, so this is what I do to get that. But I personally, myself, cannot stand. I catch myself always if I'm going to say to someone, if I'm going to make an excuse. I hate excuses so much, and I try so hard not to make them. I may voice something like, this is bothering me today, or this, hurts, but I never want to say I can't do something because of X, or I can't do something because of Y. So if I'm about to say to you, like, hey Sam, how you feeling today? I don't know what I can do today, Randy, like, I'm pretty tired. I won't say that.
Yeah.
I'll be like, yeah, my ankle's a little banged up, but like, let's do something anyway, I never want to be catching myself, giving myself outs. I hate that so much, like, as soon as I'm about to make one, I'm like, don't fucking say that. Like, you can still do shit, like, whatever it might be, So for me, it's what I don't want to be fuels me.
Yes. And
not making excuses or not being lazy, like trying to just avoid that at all costs,
Yeah.
And I can kind of give like a personal example here. I just found out like a couple of days ago my dad's in the hospital and he's an alcoholic. And he's drank himself to the point where he literally has to be in the hospital. Like they have to he pretty much just has to go to rehab, right? And for me, I didn't have my first sip of alcohol till I was 21 because of that. Like I was like, that is what I don't want. I'm gonna have nothing to do with it. And even now, it's still very casual for me. When I do drink, I don't drink that often, and it's still a little part of me is like, I never want that. I never want to be like that. So I'm just not gonna have that. I'm just not gonna have that in my life. So it's just that reverse psychology for me is the biggest thing. Like I just don't want to be that. So I won't let myself get to that, by just not engaging in that behavior. And in the example of maybe for your clients, for example, are like, oh, like I just love sugar. Do you love sugar more than you love your health? Do you dislike feeling like shit more than you dislike not eating that thing, right? Like which one is more important to you? And it just comes down to that. And if it is being unhealthy, that's a problem. But like it's a problem that only you can solve. Like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right?
Yeah, and we can't, we can't fix everybody, and some people want to improve, and those are really enjoyable people to work with, and some people they don't. They're lying to themselves. They're lying to themselves, and that's problematic because there's no, until they have acceptance, there's really no formulation of a plan to really implement. So we kind of have to want to make that change. I think too, it's worthwhile mentioning with your point, humans, they learn from watching, right? So like modeling, communication happens a lot more with body language than verbal cues. Well, it's no different than behaviors, right? So like, I've got a 12-year-old little girl that I'm trying to provide a positive influence on. If she sees me every single night eating chips and crushing pints, well, guess what she thinks is the norm, right? If she sees me on my phone, wasting time, flipping through whatever station, what do you think she's gonna do?
But that's acceptable. And
That's-
that's what you do.
exactly.
Yeah, if dad does it, I can do it.
That's it.
Yeah, you have to set an example.
And like I said, I'm far from perfect. There's things that I'm sure I'm doing that it's going to be tough to to correct later on when she's a little bit older, because I'm hard on her. But one thing that I'm very proud of is, like, I don't waste time. I am always doing something, and I know that she sees that. Very seldom do you see my ass sitting still, and when we do, it's usually because we're watching a movie together, as a family or whatever. But you won't see me watching TV. You won't see me flipping through my phone. Like, if I'm on my phone, it's because I'm responding to somebody or I'm doing something that's work related. I'm not just scrolling through aimlessly, watching the time tick away wastefully. Like, holy fuck. There's so many things I would much rather be doing. And I know by living that way, I know for a fact, I believe in it. She sees it, and at some point that is going to, is going to cast forward.
And that can be somebody's way to keep themselves accountable, right? I'm sure there's lots of different ways people keep themselves accountable. For you, it was like, I need to be, like, I matter to people. Mine was, I don't want certain things, therefore I do certain things. And in that example, it's, I'm a role model, and I have to model behaviors that are appropriate and successful for my kids. I'm sure that matters to people, and that's maybe their motivation and way to keep themselves accountable. There's probably just a shitload of reasons people keep themselves accountable, but that's a really good one. I'm sure for a lot of people that would resonate.
I hope so. I mean, Frankie, like, we have to be positive role model. People are always watching. People are always watching. They may not listen, but they're always watching.
Even people you don't know.
Totally.
Like, I had a group of athletes outside training last week, and there was a little girl with her dad who was watching us from, like, maybe 50 meters away, and she was just enthralled by what we were doing. And she was like a toddler. Like, she can't even, like, formulate a sentence to, like, come talk to us, but she's, like, fully engaged in what we're doing. And maybe what we're doing, which is having fun, being active, getting, like, improving our health, getting better, is having a little impact on that little girl who doesn't even know us.
I think so.
Right? From across the park.
Yeah.
So you always want to be thinking that somebody's watching.
Yeah.
Even when you don't think they are. Like, even when I'm at home alone sometimes, I'll be like, nobody's watching me, but if somebody was watching me, what would they think of me right now?
Yeah, that's right.
And I do think about that often.
Yeah, that's
Because
cool.
if I'm alone, then it's a good motivator too.
Awesome. All right, so I would, is there anything else you want to add on what we just chatted so far? What I would like to do is, for the viewers that have been following us and are engaged, Sam and I are in the early process of starting to develop and create a tactical combat athletic package that has a very job specific for professionals, so military, law enforcement specifically. A conditioning segment that will be subscription based, and it'll be available for folks that want to sign up for it. And then there'll be also a nutrition piece as well. And what Sam and I have talked about was some of the realities when you're wearing 60 pounds of gear for hours and hours on end. There's parts of the body that need to be strengthened, that need to be worked out, mobility increased, flexibility increased, and that's very job specific. Not saying that those who are interested in the general public that find it interesting and find it helpful, of course you'll have access to it too, but we do want to target and focus on specifically law enforcement guys and the military, knowing that there's pieces and parts of equipment that they have to wear on a regular basis, and because of that, some folks have posterior chain issues, some folks have hip impingement issues, et cetera, et cetera. So what Sam and I are going to do is we're going to work on this project together. We're going to make it available, and every week we'll update the library with specific exercises. So for example, somebody will sign up for this subscription-based portal, and maybe they're having a hip issue, for an example. Sam and I will not only give you a couple of exercises that will help strengthen those areas, but we're going to show you, explain it, and then if there's questions that pertain to, well, if I'm on the job for 8 hours, we kind of got to eat or consume nutritional fuel that's readily accessible. So I eat fast food joints or whatever's out there. So what Sam and I are also going to do is we're going to provide you some quick, expedient nutritional fuels that you can prepare at home. You throw in your blow-up bag or your go bag, and then that's there and that's available for you. So it's a little bit of a healthier choice and option, So when you're on the job for potentially 8-10 hours or whatever it might be, rather than running for that less than advantageous fast food, you can reach in your go bag with some thought, pre-planned thought ahead of time. So this is in the early stages, but I just want to put that out there. We're going to work on it over the coming weeks, and then once it is ready and available, we'll do another chat, and then we'll get it off the ground. So giving that, please fire your comments towards us. If there's anything specifically you'd like to see, military, law enforcement, or general public for sure, we'll address it. We'll keep it going, but that's coming. We're looking forward to getting it off the ground, and we'll see how it goes.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Right on. Thanks a lot, Sam. Appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, leave your comments, hit the like button and all that good stuff. And honestly, guys, thanks for tuning in. Sam and I really enjoy doing this, and we're only going to keep it going as long as we're getting some feedback from you guys. So thank you very much, guys, and have a good day.
Take care.